There are small teams currently playing with relationism, and Racing Santander is one of them. Under Jose Alberto Lopez, Racing Santander has dominated the second division in Spanish football, playing beautiful relationism, free-flowing football. In this video, we're going to break down Racing Santander's tactic in Football Manager. Before we look at their tactic, we need to take a look at what Racing Santander is doing in real life. They're currently leading the La Liga 2. They've lost 7 times, they've drawn 5 games. It's almost like a win-loss kind of situation. So their tactic isn't perfect, but it's a bit expressive and it kind of leans towards relationism. We'll take a look at one of these games or two. There's the one game here against Las Palmas in Liga 2. They went on to beat Las Palmas by 4-1. But looking at their shape, Racing Santander set up in a flat back 4, 2 defensive midfielders, 3 attacking midfielders and 1 centre forward. Now these players are very capable of rotating among each other. Sometimes the number 10 or the attacking midfielder can be inside the penalty box. Sometimes the midfielder, the left-sided midfielder, Vicente, can also be in the attacking position. But looking at the statistics of the game, we see here that Las Palmas actually had 60% of the ball. So even though Racing Santander love to play in possession, they are very capable of stepping out of possession and conceding possession to the opponents and then allowing them to have all the ball while they do most of the scoring. The XG in this game, even though they won 4-1, was about 1.91. So it's not a system that is overly reliant on possession. They kind of have their flexibility about how they go about doing things. There's another game that we can look at. That's the most recent game against Burgos. They actually won this game 1-0 and it was much harder to win. However, they set up in the same way, flat back 4, 2 holding midfielders, 3 attacking midfielders and 1 centre forward. However, if we look at the stats for this game, you can see that Racing Santander had a lot more of the ball this time. The XG was a lot lower. However, they did manage to win the game 1-0. Now, they are a team that likes to hold on to possession of the ball, but they don't do it just for the sake of it. So it's not, you won't see high possession numbers like 60% possession or whatever. But they tend to keep the game towards the center of the pitch, having their 2 inside forwards drift into the central areas closer to the number 10, and the number 10 himself can actually drift into the box and end up being in the striker position, or the striker tends to drop deep into the number 10 position and stay closer to the central midfielders, linking up play and then creating chances that way. One of the defensive midfielders is responsible for getting closer to the goalkeeper, staying in between the 2 centre halves and receiving the ball from the goalkeeper when the team tries to build up. So you normally see them in a flat back 4, but when they're building up, they build up in a back 3 because they have one of the defensive midfielders dropping into that space to receive the ball. Generally, their statistics, despite being top in the league, their possession is about 53% possession. They don't dominate all the time. They have only 2 goals per game, and most of their goals come from inside the box. So it shows that they're not trying long shots or being too wasteful in trying to create chances. They're always trying to walk the ball into the box and finishing off their chances there. They do take a good number of shots, about 13.5 per game. However, when they're defending, they have kept about 7 clean sheets in the league. They've conceded a whopping number of 1.3 goals, which is something we look to fix in Football Manager, but we'll make our ways to try and do it. With that being said, let's look at the system in Football Manager. So here's the combined shape for the tactic in Football Manager. I'm going to go through all the player roles and all the internal player instructions to help you understand why most of these roles are chosen and some of them that you can actually go ahead to tweak when you're trying to understand Racing Santander's tactic in the game. Now, Racing Santander, as we've already established, prefer to play a slow, patient possession style of play. Now, if you look at the way they're set up in possession, the goalkeeper is a standard goalkeeper. The reason for this is because he is responsible for playing very simple passes. Racing Santander like to build up in a back 3, but you're going to notice that they set up in a 2-man pairing in normal back 4. There are 2 centre backs and 2 wing backs. However, the 3rd centre back is a half back that is going to drop deep, and he is the one that's responsible for collecting the ball from the goalkeeper. The 4 backs in this team offer the width. That's why I went for 2 wing backs. The one player I know has an instruction is the box-to-box midfielder. Ideally, this player is going to be a defensive midfielder, a normal defensive midfielder. But I did notice that he was a bit too careful. If you want to have some expansive range, go ahead and use the box-to-box midfielder and then go into his internal player instructions. Go ahead and add the freedom of movement, adding roam from position for the freedom of movement. However, if it's too expansive and you want to be a bit more solid, go for the defensive midfielder. But remember that the defensive midfielder is not going to have that freedom of movement. In attack, Racing Santander attack in a very narrow shape. That is why I went for 2 inside forwards, or 1 inverted winger and 1 inside forward. These players are going to sit very, very narrow. You can go over to the attacking width and go ahead and change that to sit much more narrower. The idea here is to protect the center and force play to the wide areas, and also to create a lot of congestion in the middle and make sure that players are closer together to receive passes and continue the string of passes. You can also go over to the inside forward on the right hand side and ask him to also sit a bit narrower, staying closer to the number 10, which is the free role. The number 10 could also be an attacking midfielder. You can go for the attacking midfielder, normal attacking midfielder. But I noticed that this role wasn't as expressive as I wanted him to be. He wasn't drifting too far to the left or to the right. He was just mainly staying in the center, which is not really what I want from the free role. That is why I opted for this position. You can go over to the free role and then remember to always add the room from position instruction for him as well. The only issue I had with the free role was the relationship with the striker, but I think it's really good that you have to use a deep line forward or a target forward. I kind of prefer the deep line forward because he has a lot more mobility to him. You can also ask him to run from position. The target forward is a bit stationary. But what happens here is that the deep line forward is going to drop into space, and then the free role can take advantage of the space vacated by the deep line forward and get into the box and try to create chances and even finish off chances. Out of possession, Racing Santander presses in a flat 4-4-2. You can choose to have your central midfielders stay as defensive midfielders, but I feel this flat 2 is a bit more effective. The centre forward stays forward, however, the attacking midfielder becomes a tracking centre forward, joining in the front 2. You also have a pressing central midfielder on the left hand side. On the same side, you have a pressing fullback. For the team instruction, the passing directness is slightly shorter and you're going to play with a low tempo as well. The attacking width is narrow, as we've seen from the inside winger and the inside forward. However, you're also going to ask the team to be a bit more expressive, and you're also going to tone down the time wasting and leave it on less often. You have to move the ball around quickly even though they are playing with a low tempo. You see from our shape here in the visualizer that we actually have a back three all set up. The half back is going to be a lot closer to the center halves. However, in build up, we can see that the two center halves are going to find their position on the edge of the box, while the half back is going to drop a lot closer and receive the ball from the goalkeeper. The build up strategy involves playing through the press, and the goalkeeper is going to do that with short passing. The distribution speed is kind of kept balanced, but you can see that in goalkeeper distribution, we have set that to playmaker rather than just the center backs. This will encourage the goalkeeper to play the ball to the half back. When the team is fully in possession, we're only going to discourage the dribbling. The main focus of this system is possession, so players are not going to really carry the ball and make individual runs. It's a fairly simple system, and if you look at the way we're set up in the final third, same thing, discourage dribbling, but everything else is kept as standard. You can see that the shoot from distance is also discouraged, but you can also tell the team to walk the ball into the box in case you want to have a bit more control over the game or you're struggling to break teams down. This is going to slow the game down a lot for you, so sometimes just leave it on balanced or standard. Out of possession, Racing Santander play with a high press, but they're not forcing the press as often. That's why you can see the trigger press is sent just more often and not much more often. The defensive line is pretty standard because I didn't really notice them play with a high defensive line in any way. And you can also see that the defensive line behavior is kept balanced. The defensive transition is not forced for a counter attack or holding shape. It's just left in the middle as standard, so in case the team goes on to recover possession, they're just going to go about moving the ball about normally. That way they can keep possession. The tackling is also standard. However, if you look at the way the team presses in the high press, the pressing trap is set to force outside. So you're going to notice that the tracking forward and the outlet center forward are dead in the middle, trying to close the center, forcing the ball to go out wide, and then the team can go about pressing the wide areas. That is why we also have a pressing central midfielder on the left hand side and a pressing fullback on the left hand side as well. Pressing trap remains the same even in the mid block and also in the low block. But you notice in the low block that we have just one player outside waiting for the counter attack. So that is the idea behind Racing Santander's tactic on Football Manager 2026. Before I forget, the original mentality for the system is actually positive, but I've noticed I've played some of the games on balanced, so you can just keep it on positive if you want to have attacking intent. Since we're playing low tempo, shorter passing, we can also try playing attacking, but I just found that positive was the sweet spot for this system. We can compare our results with what we have here in the data hub for Racing Santander. We've been playing the system for a while now. We're going to look at the tactic really soon. So if we look at the general performance for the team, we scored 1.8 goals per game, which is almost 2 goals per game like we see in real life from Racing Santander. However, we've conceded 0.8 points per game, and Racing Santander in real life have actually conceded 1.2. So I think being more expansive and being more attacking and actually help you get more goals and also help you concede more. That might get you closer to what Racing Santander are doing in real life. But to get more control of the game and reduce the amount of goals we conceded, we're going to look at the instructions that I'm currently using with FM26 to show you how that actually works. Defending wise, if you look at the way the team defends, like I mentioned, we've conceded this amount of goals, 0.8. We've also kept about 8 clean sheets, and if you look at other stats, you can see from our shooting and attacking efficiency that we are obviously clinical with high quality shooting, even though we're not shooting as often as most teams. Ideally, we're going to want to be up here in the aggressive and shooting category, but I feel like Relationism is a very patient approach. It's not an aggressive gung-ho system, which is why we find ourselves in this quadrant. In the league, we're currently sitting in 4th place as opposed to 1st, but we're 7 points off the top. We've lost 5 times. However, I have a goal difference of 20, which is 5 goals shy of the team that is currently 1st place in Leganes. But this is not a meta system, it's just a recreation of what Jose Alberto Lopez is currently doing with Racing Santander and how they're able to play Relationism football.